PHS. I will be going over chapter 15.5 through 15.8. What is the most common? The molecule is named after a derivative of pyrene, which has the structure shown above at the right. Conceptually, if any additional benzene ring is added to the bond of pyrene, labeled A, the benzo-A-pyrene molecule is obtained. Benzo-A-pyrene is a common byproduct of the incomplete combustion of fossil fuels, of organic matter, including garbage and of wood. BAP is a worrisome since it's bioaccumulative in the food chain. It has a log of KOW value at 6.3, which is comparable to any of the organic chlorine insecticides, as you can see on the table on the next slide. It is considered to be one of the top 15 carcinogenic in drinking water, along with any other compounds in this category, which is most of them are pesticides. Here we can see the top organic carcinogenic in U.S. drinking water. This is a table explaining the different types of chemicals and their risk of cancer according to 1,000 people. As we can see, I will have highlighted the benzo-pyrene. It has about 4.2 to 1,000 people, and compare that to all the other chemicals, it is very in the middle range. Benz-A-anthracene. So, the relative position in the space of the fused rings in PAH plays a major role in determining their level of carcinogenic behavior in animals. The PAH that are most potent carcinogenics each possessed a Bay region formed by branching in the benzene ring sequence. Therefore, the organization of 4 carbon atoms as an open Bay indirectly imparts a high degree of biochemical reactivity to the PAH. Thus, the benzopyrene is expected to be carcinogenic since it has a Bay region, whereas the pyrene itself does not. Environmental levels of PHS and human cancers. There's a question going on, which is, has exposure to PHS has been demonstrated to produce cancers in humans? So a lot of scientists have been trying to answer this specific question. Well, for hundreds of years it has been known that prolonged exposure in occupational settings are very high levels of coal tar, which is the principal toxic ingredient of which is benzo-A-pyrene, which we have been talking about, leads to cancer in humans. So there was a study done in 1775, the occurrence of scrotal cancer in chimney sweeps as associated of screw lodged in cervix in the skin of their genitalia. So there was modern workers in coke ovens and gas production plants and many jobs like that. They come to conclusion they found out that they had increased level of lung and kidney cancer due to this high PHS exposure. The evidence for the cancers inducted in the general public whose exposure to PHS is at the levels that are orders of a magnitude lower than the occupational environments. So what exactly is the main cause of lung cancer? Well, it's actually the inhalation of cigarette smoke, which contains many carcinogenic compounds in addition to PAS. Some scientists speculate that the higher death rate from lung cancer are in cities as compared to rural areas, found in many countries, and this is due to breathing carcinogenic air pollutants like PHS, although many other factors such as higher smoking rates also contribute. Also, many cities in developing countries have chronic problems to carbon-based air pollution. So that comes to my point of, for example, there are many serious indoor and outdoor air pollutions, which arise primarily from the unvented burning of coal and biomass for cooking and heating, and consist of primary PHS sulfate dioxide, and particularly particularly pertain to reputing to the responsible for over 1 million deaths annually in China. The rate of lung cancer in Chinese women is higher than that of men, possibly due to the higher exposure of PHS from burning coal and from cooking oil fumes. Who knew? Diesel engine exhaust. Diesel engine exhaust that are unfiltered have been labeled as a probable human carcinogen. It contains not only PHS, but also some of their derivatives contain the nitro group, NO2. These nitrate substances are even more active carcinogens that are the corresponding PHS. For example, nitropyrene and dinitropyrene are responsible for much of the mutagenic characteristics of diesel exhaust. It has the ability to cause mutations that ultimately produce cancer. These compounds are formed within the engines by reacting of pyrene with NO2 and N2O4. There's evidence that PHS are nitrated by some of the chemical smogs. So how do we control engine exhaust for pollution exactly? Well, the emission of particulate from heavy-duty diesel engines can be controlled by filter traps inside the exhaust stream. These devices temporarily retain some solids, which are worded as soot, in the exhaust and eventually oxidize them further. So scientists have been worried that during some of their residents trapped inside these traps, PHS will undergo reaction to produce even more greater quantities of nitrated PAHS. Well, this does occur. Tests indicated that total mutagenic activities of the given amount of engine exhaust is actually decreased by these devices, since most of it becomes oxidized. PHS in foods. For most non-smoker in developed countries, by far the greatest exposure to carcinogenic PHS arises from actually their diet, rather than directly polluted air, water, or soil. As expected from their mode of preparation, such as charcoal boiled and smoked meats and fish containing the highest levels of PHS found in foods. However, leafy vegetables such as lettuce, spinach can also contribute to even a greater source of carcinogenic PHS due to the deposition of these substances from the air onto the leaves of the vegetables while they're still growing. So therefore, unredefined grains can also contribute significantly to the total amount of these PHSs ingested from food. Mechanism of action of environmental estrogens. So let me give you a quick background of what exactly this topic is. So for the past decades, there have been a new threat to the health of wildlife and possibly of humans. Exposure to synthetic organic chemicals in the environment have been identified, as scientists have said. It have been established that certain compounds can affect the reproductive and immune health of higher organisms and can also increase the rate of cancer in the reproductive organs. So, however, this has been uncertain debate in the scientific community whether or not or how significant the risk to human health from the environmental level of these compounds are. But to begin, so the mechanism of action of environmental estrogens. So the chemical in the question interfere with the systems and the organisms that operate by transmitting extremely low concentration of chemicals messenger molecule called hormones. Hormones flow down the bloodstream to the point of production and their storage at their target organs. So they include involving the sexual reproduction in both females and males. As the arrival of the hormone at the receptor is a signal from the cell to initiate action of some certain type, much of the concern about humans centers right upon the interference of estrogen, which is the female sex hormone, and androgens, which is the male sex hormone. So These produce from cholesterol in the ovaries of the females and the testes of the male in response to the signal from the brain and other organs. The hormone's actions are initiated by the binding of the hormone to a specific receptor in a cell. This is why it's important to know how and when and why the receptor is important when it comes to binding. So, the result of the hormone receptor complex binds to a specific region of DNA in the cell nucleus, an action that turns to determine the action of the genes. Certain environmental chemicals can also bind to the hormone receptor and thereby either mimic or block the action of the hormone itself, which is very, very important. In the particular so-called promiscuous, sorry if I mispronounced that, estrogen receptor will bind to the number of compounds, even ones that bear little structural resemblance to estrogen. However, much of the compounds bind to the receptor with such a small fraction of the strength of the estrogen itself. Estrogen itself binds to the main receptor by hydrogen bonds by two OH groups, and they are attracted by the ring system to the amino acid chain. A second estrogen receptor has been recently discovered by scientists, in addition to interfering mechanisms that I had talked about above. But however, some compounds can accelerate the breakdown of natural hormones, and others can promote the conversion of male hormones into female ones. There is a substrate of endocrine system of hormonal production, and the transmissions are often referred as environmental estrogens. More of the general names for these class of substrates are the synthetic hormonal active agents, which is HAA, also the endocrine distribute chemical, which is the EDC, and the environmental hormones and the exoestrogens. Couple figures of how the molecules that we've been talking about compare to each other, and how they can we can see how they become toxic on the way they're formed, and how they can actually become a concern to the environment. So we see the comparison of the phthalate esters compared to the estradiol, the PCB, all different kinds of molecules that I've been talking about. Genistein, which is another hormonal active diol, which is a molecule whose structure has similar to that of estrogen. Genistein is produced naturally by plants by either being a synthetic substance. It is a member of the group of the natural chemical called flavonoids. Genistein is often found in significant concentrations in wood products, and in soy-based food products. A lot of researchers have found that this genistein from pulp mine may have caused fermenizing and other reproductive effects in fish that swim in effluent-fled waters. Most of the phenol and genistein have been found to have a productive effect at very low doses in tested animals. It's not very clear yet whether genistein overall has a productive or negative effect on human health. However, some scientists have worried that the levels of genistein ingested by babies fed through soy milk. The PCB conjugers have commonly found in environmental samples and identified recently by screening some and show that allelgric weak estrogenic activities all have left at least one orthochlorine atom. Phthalates. esters are widely used as plasticers in most common plastics such as polyvinyl chloride, such as PVC, that you can find anywhere around you actually. However, these are harmful to the environment because they can leach onto the environment because they are not chemically bonded to the polymer. The most important example is di-2-ethylhexyl phthalate, such as DEHP, which is present in many plastics found around your house. Actually, so some that are really used by children, where phthalate plasticers can consume up to 45% of the weight of the object. So that's why it's very used. It can support its weight. However, some examples that you can find around your house, anywhere really, includes shower curtains, raincoats, rain boots, plastic bags, garden hoses, pretty much anything you can think of. Majority of the plastics that you have around your house contain this material. However, the use of phthalates in baby bottle nipples and teethers have been very long discontinued because they have very harmful chemicals that can be ingested by the child that could cause very harmful products in the long run, really. So, where exactly is these phthalates also found? They are also found in cosmetics and other personal care, such as shampoos and deodorants. Think about it. They're in a bottle, and they are prepared in a bottle, and they contain this material. The presence of these DHAP in plastic medical devices, such as intravenous PVC bags, also have raised a concern, such a small leakage of this plasticers into the patients occurring during medical procedures. So if you don't want it near a child, of course you don't want it near a medical procedure or anything surgery related. So in the United States, neither DHP nor phthalates are used in food wraps or food packaging. However, the dye has been found to be important sources of phthalates for humans. A place where they have banned this phthalate is actually the European Commission, where they banned phthalate softeners in PVC toys that are meant for children, typically under the age of 3. Such children tend to suck and chew on these toys, and they start tearing it apart, and these particles of these rattlers, teether bottles, any toy-related PVC toy really, would be extracted and it would be ingested into the child. And these are the phthalate esters. However, a scientific panel by the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission concluded that most plasticers used in PVC toy diisonyl phthalate doesn't pose a risk to humans. Nevertheless, some companies now are produce phthalate-free toys and other products used by small children. Both the U.S. and Canadian government have recently begun regulating maximum levels of phthalates in toys and childcare articles. The compounds discussed that I talked about are thought to be significant environmental estrogen uncovered to this date, really. There's a lot of questions that are yet to be answered. However, the synthetic compound to many synthetic substances have not really been all discovered, but the US EPA, for example, in 1999, have been extensively screening the potential endocrine disruptors. Then again, there has been a lot of regulations with these toys, and the European have been also included in this as well. And there's been a lot of material changes, which is very good because we don't want young children to be